Welcome. It is 6:31 and we're going to begin our Charter and Rules meeting. It is Monday, January 27th, 2025. It is just after 6:30. I am the chair, Meg McGrath-Smith, and sitting to my right is Councilor Bacon, who's also on Charter and Rules. And in chambers, we also have Councilor Patty Devine. Thank you for joining us. We are going to be, of course, hosting this meeting in City Hall chambers, but it's also available to be seen on Channel 15 or on Zoom. And on Zoom, there's also, and on Channel 15, the live Spanish interpretation available as well. And thank you so much to our interpreters who work so hard to help us make sure these meetings are accessible. Okay, we have a busy agenda today. And so we'll kind of move as efficiently as we can through the items.
So I would like to make a motion to suspend rules and take items 1 and 2 as a package.
So moved. And also, my apologies. I want to name that the third musketeer of our trio is absent today. That's City Council President Tessa Murphy-Romboletti. She is homesick and unable to attend today, so it'll be a two-woman show today. So I think what that means is you make a motion, I second it, and then we approve it. Okay.
You can make the motion.
That's true. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that is item 1, minutes of September 16th, and also the minutes of September 21st, 2024.
So I'll make a motion to receive the minutes.
Oh, sorry, October 21st and September 16th. Yes, those are the 2 dates.
Right.
Thank you.
So I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes.
I will
September
second.
16th and October 21st.
I'll second. Under discussion? Anyone who wants to make any corrections to the minutes, or just we're willing to move forward and accept them as they
I
are?
saw a couple minor things, but it's not worth
Okay.
getting into.
All right, then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Motion to
yep.
take up item 3.
Yes. Okay, so second, all in favor?
Aye.
This is from Tessa Murphy-Romboletti, ordered that the City Council amend its rules to identify which committees certain licenses should be sent to in an effort to ensure consistency and clarity.
So we do have a list.
Yep. All right, so I just want to read into the record the list that we got. That the licenses that are approved by City Council are the secondhand licenses, street vendor, junk dealer, pawnbroker, billiards, livery, pool tables, and bowling alley. So those are the licenses that are approved by City Council. I think the only thing we can do with this one at this point is to table it as it is and wait for more information around where these are supposed to be taken up. And I think just make a chart that says very clearly.
That here somewhere?
Here.
No, I have the agenda, the thing you just read.
It's number 3.
Yes, number 3. If you want to take the whole packet, you'll have everything.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Because I think the goal is to make a chart that's just very clear what has to go where. We have a lot of these named in our rules. But maybe having a cheat sheet that makes it very clear. I know there's been some concern over time that sometimes something gets sent to DGR when it should be sent elsewhere, or sent to one place when it should go another. Yes, Councilor Bacon.
Thanks. I would just say that our rules do also allow us to send an order anywhere. And sometimes,
There's a
if
reason.
time is of the essence, and maybe one committee's meeting sooner than another, so we have a little flexibility. But I agree, it gives clarity to people applying for things when they have a good idea where it's going.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I like that. I think communication to the folks who are applying is really important. The system is not, it's not always transparent.
Right.
And it could help them. I like that point.
All right, well, I'll make a motion to table to have a chart developed.
Yes. Okay, I will second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Motion to take up 4 and 5 as a package. To suspend rules and take up 4 and 5 as a package.
Yes, second. All in favor? Aye. Item 4, and these are really companion orders. Item 4 was back from October 2023 from Councilors Givner and Tallman. with community support, order that all ordinances and charter rules reflecting city council and city council subcommittee meeting notices be updated to reflect acceptance of email as sufficient method of notice and city website posting as sufficient method of public notice. This was taken up and tabled twice. And then item 5, same date, October 3rd, 2023, from Givner. With community support, order that the following section of our codes of ordinances and charter be updated to reflect use of email as sufficient for special meeting notice. And that is section 12, special meetings of city council. And then there's a really quick, I might just do an abbreviated reading of that with your permission. The mayor may at any time call a special meeting of city council by public posting through the city website, along with written notifications thereof, together with a statement of the subjects to be considered thereat, to be deposited in the post office, post paid and addressed to the persons to be notified, at least 48 hours before the time appointed. Hello, we're just joined by Councilor Carmen Ocasio in the chambers. Thank you for joining us. At least 48 hours before the time appointed for such a meeting, or to be left at the usual place of residence of each member of the council by email at least 48 hours before the time appointed for such meeting. So really taking these up together and wanting to address them, because one of the issues is if we have to change our charter, then there's an entire process we have to follow around doing that. I would love to just defer quickly and invite Solicitor Bissonnette. If you could please give us a brief overview of the language that we have here in front of us for the changes that may need to be made. And if you could give us a brief and brilliant overview of what the process would be for us to make these changes to our charter and ordinances.
Thank you to the chair. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I took a look at this again this afternoon and tried to finalize the crafting of some language that would meet the moment in terms of where we are, to try to avoid actually using email and substituting electronic transmission for that, because God knows where we're going to be 5 years from now with the advances in technology. So that would be a more all-encompassing statement. I also note that the way this would be laid out would be, first, the charter must be changed to substitute the use of electronic communications for such notices as may be required when the mayor calls a special meeting. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to also devise a way for members who are not electronically inclined, who are of my generation or older, let's say, who may seek alternative methods by notifying the clerk that they'd like to have their agenda and notices delivered, hand-delivered, or in some cases could be mail, first class, postage prepaid. So there's some alternatives there for folks who don't do their business by email now. I've added a section as well to the ordinances so that can be adopted once the charter change is through. With the uncertainty over tomorrow's election and the ramifications of successful passage, that may also require some minor alterations to the charter. So that may become part of a bigger package. This certainly can go on its own and essentially just modernizes notice provisions. Mm-hmm. Happy to take any questions on it.
Yes, one question I had is, it says hand delivery, and I know that was in the original. I feel like that's not reasonable. I know that at one point we had a messenger, right? Who literally, that's all they did, was they hand delivered notices around town or got things from one department to the other, and that position doesn't exist anymore. We very much live in an electronic transmission world where our city council assistant is emailing things on behalf of the committee. So I wonder about removing hand delivery as an option there. And instead it's saying may elect to alternatively receive all notices by first class mail to their place of residence or to their, or hand delivered to their city hall mailbox. I don't know if, but also we don't really use our city hall mailboxes. Yes, Councilor Bacon.
So all I would say to that is I like there being a backup plan. And I think it's reasonable to say it would be used very rarely. And it would probably at the most involve 1 or 2 city councilors that would need to have things delivered. And my only concern about using the regular mail is that sometimes the special meetings get called with a fairly short notice, and to meet the 48 hours, you might have a struggle.
Right.
To do that. So I don't think it would be abused.
Okay.
And if people need to elect to alternatively receive things, I think it will be generally known, like at the beginning of the session, the political session. So I don't think it would be a surprise. So I think it's good to have a backup plan. There might also become the day where for some unknown reason we have a blackout.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the
we
post office
just
is on
don't know.
strike or whatever it is.
We just don't know. It's always good to have backup. Having been on computerized medical records, once people got used to it and something happened, it was, what are we going to do? I said, remember the paper and pen you loved?
Yeah, they're back.
But anyway.
So I do appreciate that. So maybe the language gets shifted to something like members of city council may elect to alternatively receive all notices by, delivery to their place of residence or to their city hall mailbox. One of the issues with mail delivery, the initial language specifies that it has to be postmarked 48 hours ahead of time. That's no longer sufficient.
Right.
If you postmark something, even if we follow the spirit of the order,
It won't do it.
you will not get it in time, because we used to have mail that went to Springfield and then here. Now it goes to Hartford and then gets rerouted through the regional system to us. So it often does not take 48 hours to post a piece of mail now. It takes 3 or 4 days. So I have concern about us naming something in the original language that no longer feels like a good fit. And I wonder, do we have to be, I would like to create something, especially because we have to go through the process of a charter change anyway to do this. I would like to create something that endures. And I'm worried about naming something that's anachronistic within 2 to 5 years. So first class mail may not exist anymore. First class mail may no longer get things to where they need to be within 48 hours. So I think we need to think, what's the right language where it will be something that will solve the issue moving forward, given that systems could change. I like your point, Solicitor Bissonette, about changing it from email to electronic delivery. I think that makes sense. Because I think it gives us wiggle room for how things change. I don't want to create something that immediately is anachronistic. Councilor Bacon?
So on the sentence where it says members of city council may elect to alternatively receive all such notices by hand delivery.
Yeah.
How about you describe it as alternate delivery rather than specifying what it would be? I mean, it could maybe even be DoorDash that would bring them the paper, or any other.
DoorDash?
Yeah, I'm just using it. They bring food. They could bring
The new
whatever.
messenger boy.
Yeah.
Kind of
I mean,
is,
if
though.
it wasn't going to be the administrative assistant, it could be, FedEx, UPS,
I worry about it being abused in order to make, I don't think we would do this now, but I worry about, someone wanting to kind of like stick it to it and be like, now every meeting, the assistant, the city council has to go around and deliver to 8 people. And it becomes this like crazy time suck. I don't want to think that people are that petty, but I could see it being abused. And I want to make sure that it's not.
Well, if I may.
Yeah.
Then I would eliminate the word all and just leave it as receive such notices upon request instead of saying all. Because it makes it all or nothing, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I know that some people don't have email and they don't want to receive things by email. They really want to get it in paper.
Right, if it's one
And that
person
could
or
be
two
fine.
people and they've consistently done it for 2 years, then I don't think it's a game.
Yeah, I
If-
sort of
yeah.
wonder if it should be, if receive all notices by first class mail, postmarked with enough days to receive it before the meeting, or printed and placed on their city hall desk, or by electronic, delivery.
They wouldn't
I think
know it
that's
was
right.
there.
All right, I see Councilor Patty Devine, and then I see Councilor Ocasio.
Okay, there's two things here. One is that the Holyoke City Charter shall be amended. That doesn't happen overnight. You
No,
have to
no.
have the mayor approve that, then go to the state rep. So that can just sort of maybe be on hold until it's sent to the mayor, he approves it, then it's sent to the state. The second part of this, I think, is good. And you're right. Even if you go to the city, years ago, we could go to the post office and they had the slot for Holyoke only, and they'd get it the next day. But that's no longer the case. So mailing it is great to those people that may not have email, but I can't imagine that it's going to get there in 48 hours. But the first part, the section 12, I certainly would recommend that we send that to the mayor for his signature and then send that to the state if we want to change the charter.
Yes, absolutely. The process is that we need to discuss this, approve the language in council, and then send to the mayor and then to the state. So it is definitely not a quick process. And that's why earlier this year it was really delayed as we were focusing instead on other matters. This certainly is not a pressing matter, but it is something that makes sense to update for sure. Councilor Ocasio, would love to have you weigh in.
I do have email, but I don't get to my emails all the time, one.
Yep.
And two, I'm having a little problem when they mail the agenda to my home. I get it the next day
Yeah.
after the meeting is already done and over with, And I get a lot of emails, so it's like a lot of emails to go through. And I do take care of my mom and do other things, so I don't have time to be looking through all that. That's how come I would like mine to be mailed in and try to mail it on time, because I don't get it on time.
Yes.
I've been having this problem lately. I spoke to Jeffrey about it. I don't know what's going on. The last week ones, I didn't even get them in the mail.
Yeah.
And I think Jeffrey was on vacation, I believe. But I didn't even get the agenda in the mail either.
Yeah, which is a big problem. I sometimes literally receive it the day that we're going to the meeting. So it does strike me that right now, we say 48 hours ahead of time, and that's definitely not enough time. I'd love to hear from the solicitor around how many hours do you think things at this point need to be, or to our assistant Jeffrey, how many hours actually make sense for it to be postmarked by now, given this reality, for folks who, opt to do that?
Well, to Councilor Ocasio's point, if a meeting is happening on Monday and they're being mailed on Friday, she may not be getting it in time. Part of it is I may not be getting some agendas completed by chairs until Friday. And I try to mail all of the agendas for the upcoming week on the same day, rather than sending multiple envelopes for multiple meetings, just to kind of save on postage. But, it's really a matter of, how soon do I get an agenda finalized, by a specific committee.
Right. So effectively, if I think I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying because open meeting law is such that chairs are not, required to kind of make their agendas official until 48 hours before the meeting. As a result, we can't make the notices go out before 48 hours before a meeting.
I mean, somebody, there are plenty of occasions where an agenda is ready, before that, and I'm able to get it posted before that. but some are, right up until the last minute before I'm able to get it posted. And, like I said, I'm trying to mail them all out in one envelope rather than mailing out multiple, agendas in multiple times.
I wonder too about the capacity for people to say, I would just like mine to be printed and available at my desk 48 hours before.
Well, for most people, that is the case, but the option is there if somebody wants their agenda mailed to them, that of course is, that's something I'm going to do.
Okay, yes, Councilor Bacon?
Thanks. So my biggest concern would be the city council meetings, because our deadline for submitting orders is roughly 48 hours before the meeting.
Yeah.
And so we're putting ourselves in a bind of either having to back that up, and make our own rules that are in excess of the open meeting law, to give adequate time. So I think we're kind of coming full circle back to hand delivery or physical delivery of some sort in those instances. Because if somebody's depending on receiving the hard copy of the agenda for the notice, having it on their desk isn't going to provide that, because they won't know it's there. But most people, I think, have already, and Jeffrey can correct us if I'm wrong, I think almost every member of the council, except maybe a couple, have accepted the electronic notices. And I think there's only one or two that are seeking the physical. So this would really affect a couple people.
I do feel like long-term, I just don't think that we're going to potentially be able to make this shift because of where open meeting law is, to address the fact that the mail is just slower than it used to be. I think you're right. It's just those two things are in conflict.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, what do you think about this concept of hand delivering versus first-class mail?
I mean, it's, if it's something that needs to be done in a pinch, but,
It's hard to do all the time.
if it is a regular thing, it could take a pretty good chunk out of my day driving around the city.
Yeah. Jeffrey, at this point, how many folks are having notices mailed to them versus electronic?
There are 3 right now. The sense that I get is that it's less about being noticed or about just having a physical copy ahead of time to have a chance to look it over. I mean, I may be wrong about that, but, even when they've arrived late, counselors have still known that the meeting was happening. So I think that the calendar invites are at least providing the awareness that the meetings are happening, but, to everyone's point, if somebody wants an agenda in the mail, it would be good for them to get it in the mail before the meeting happens.
Okay. All right, thank you. Councilor Bacon?
I would just notice too that this whole language is around notice of the meeting, not receiving the agenda of the meeting,
That's true.
right? So it's really about making sure people know, especially in the second order about a special meeting. And sometimes those pop up. I mean, not at the very last minute, but sometimes it can be a short notice. So we might be a little too worried about the agenda aspect. I mean, if we're going to just be technical about it.
Right. Well, I wonder too around, this clearly is what it says about noticing. I wonder if we have to look at the sections of our charter or ordinances that deal with the agenda and when those are available or how they're available. Mr. Bissonette, do you want to weigh in on that? We're talking about noticing versus the agenda and whether there are other sections and ordinances or charter that address the agenda being available and mailed, or is this the only part?
This is specific to the special meeting, and the language in the entirety of Section 12 calls for the mayor to not just call the meeting, but also outline the subject matter to be discussed at that meeting. So that would be the mayor's prerogative to constitute an agenda for that special meeting. And again, these are so unusual and usually not allowing for delay for some reason, a state deadline, perhaps an emergency that needs to be addressed by an appropriation. So that's why the 48-hour language is there, so it comports with the open meeting law. But that is all Section 12 deals with, are these special meetings. The ordinance provision below would allow ordinance to set out the first-class mail exception along with the certified mail, because that's usually a requirement when dealing with zoning and the ZBA. And also I believe Councilor Bacon's point, to not tie this to hand delivery or place of residence. In the Section 12 amendment, the second sentence could go something like, members of the city council may elect alternatively receive all such notices as set by ordinance. And that would allow the council, without going through the state legislature, to go ahead and change that by ordinance or council rules.
That's a good one.
Yeah, there's some elegance to that, Mike. But is there any issues with that in terms of getting that approved through the state? Do you think they will
No,
dislike
I don't believe so.
So maybe
There's
that's
nothing violative. It's more up to localities on how they interpret the requirements under the open meeting law. In this case, as long as we're complying with the 48 hours and public notice, those are all the important boxes to be checked.
okay. So maybe next time we look at this, we should look at that language and shift the detail down into ordinance and use that language up in terms of where we would actually move the charter change to the mayor and then to the state. Oh, I see Councilor Devine.
Yeah, I know that the city clerk mails out the agenda. Okay, so we get that. The other thing too, and maybe Councilor Attorney Bissonnette, for item 5, special meetings of the city council, the mayor may at any time call a special meeting. So doesn't the president of the city council can also call a special meeting? So I don't know if that's part of this or if that's under another section. So I'm just curious about that.
I believe that's under the rules.
Okay,
Yeah, it's not, I looked for it in the charter, Councilor Devine, I didn't see it.
okay,
I haven't done a further check, but I do recall, as you do, that there is a joint ability to call special meetings. I
Okay.
believe the president's under the president in the rules.
okay. Thank you.
So do you want a motion to table for further consideration and for the maker to be able to weigh in on the language?
Yes, I also think that, I would love, Solicitor Bissonnette, if you could revise the language based on that. And you and I could meet to do that. And we also want to invite in the order as well as potentially also the clerk, if they want to weigh in as well.
For section 2-58.
Yeah.
Okay, so my motion is to table for further discussion and amendment to the language under 2-58 to include different methods of delivery.
Yep. Okay, I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much for your work and your advice on this, Solicitor Bissonnette. Appreciate it.
Welcome,
Okay.
thank you.
A motion to take up item 6.
Okay. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Devine ordered that the city council consider a rule addition to Rule 6C, decorum speaking, adding the following words as a second paragraph. No counselor shall speak more than 4 minutes during debate. The president and/or the city council administrative assistant shall keep track of the minutes. A 1-minute reminder shall be given at the 3-minute mark during debate. And I'll turn it over to the maker of the order, Councilor Devine.
Yeah, hi, thanks for taking this up. One of the reasons being is that we have a 10 o'clock deadline to, and we always have to make a motion to go 15 minutes more, 15 minutes more. And even in the Congress, the Congress can speak for 5 minutes only, and then in the Senate, they get to speak for 7 minutes. So I thought, based on those two items, if we were able to keep track of it for 4 minutes, other people would get an opportunity to speak. And my feeling is if you can't get your point across in 4 minutes, I don't know why you couldn't do that. So that's the reason I did it, just to, so we can kind of shorten our meetings, especially since there's a rule that we get out at 10 o'clock. So that's why. And again, the Congress is 5 and the Senate is 7.
All right, thank you. I'm wondering, I know early when we talked about this, there were some concerns about tracking the 4 minutes, and also not wanting to censure folks, wanting people to be able to have their say if they really didn't need to explain their thoughts in more than 4 minutes. And also, as we heard from Councilor Devine, real concerns about being efficient, sharing airtime, having meetings that are efficient, purposeful, and end on time. And I wonder about us moving this to council without prejudice to go to full council to have conversation, because it has been tabled back on May 7th. And I wonder if it just makes sense to move it to council in order to have the conversation and vote and have an answer on it. Otherwise, it's just sitting in the jacket. Councilor Bacon?
Well, whether we agree or disagree, I do think it's important for committees to make a recommendation to the council. And I've seen frustration on the part of President Ramboletti, I mean, rightfully so, when we begin to do committees in the city council meeting, because that takes a lot longer than somebody speaking for a minute too long. So, I don't see that there's anything wrong with respectfully disagreeing and giving things to the city council with a 2-to-1 vote or a 3-to-2 vote in different situations. But for myself, you can start, and what I would envision if we sent it to council without a recommendation is getting into the discussion around, is that each time the person speaks because you can speak 3 times? Yeah. Or is that the whole time? So if somebody uses 1 minute, then do they have 3 left? I mean, I can just see this going into a very winding road of discussion. And I guess if I was sitting in the room and I was at meeting after meeting after meeting where there was a constant situation of people going on for over 4 minutes, I'd consider it, but I don't really see that happening.
Yeah, and I haven't timed people to know. Sometimes it might seem long, but I haven't timed it myself to know. So I can't say with any data behind me how long people are in general speaking. I guess we can return to the maker of the order. I was wondering, do you have any specific thoughts around, because people can speak 3 times, would this reset each time, or would they track it each time, and in total it would be 4 minutes, or would it be 4 minutes each time?
I have no problem with your committee not having a recommendation, bringing it back to the city council. I should tell you that first. It's just that my feeling is, and again, it certainly can be discussed, but right now, I think you have to have permission to speak 3 times, if I remember the rule, okay? Yes. So, and that rarely anybody asks for permission or permission is given. But all I'm saying is that in order for other people to speak and to get their point across, and again, to go back to the Congress and the Senate, I think if we can limit it 1 time, and they can speak 3 times, 4 minutes apiece, doesn't bother me. But at some point, they shouldn't go on for 20 minutes at one time. That's all I'm saying. So if you want to do it without a recommendation, I have no problem with that.
So I have a thought.
Okay, so it seems though that we've clarified that it's 4 minutes every time you speak. So if you have 2 times to speak, it would be 4 minutes each time, and then of course council could vote to allow someone a 3rd time to speak. Yes, Councilor Bacon?
What I'd like to do then is offer an amendment and say, no counselor shall speak for more than 4 minutes at a time during debate.
Yep.
Okay.
Because it doesn't then
yeah.
limit them to total.
I agree.
Plus, it would become a tracking nightmare.
It would for the assistant, I agree.
And I mean, I wouldn't even mind saying 3 minutes at a time, because you're going to get another time. You know what I mean? But whatever.
I can't amend it. You could, but amend it to 3. I'd be happy with that.
I'm happy with either. Yeah.
You know.
But I think that seems more reasonable to me that it's per time.
Okay, so we change it to 3 minutes at a time. We don't limit the number of times except by our current rules, which somebody needs permission to go for the third time.
Right.
By a majority present anyway.
Sure.
Because if something is very hot and very complicated,
Yep.
I don't want to be in the position of limiting the speech. On the other hand, I do think if people want to speak, you know, then you want to have an opportunity within the body of the debate.
Also, not forgetting too, we have the capacity to suspend our rules at any time. Someone could say, please, I would like to make a motion to suspend the rules to allow me another 3 minutes to speak. The body
Right.
can say, no, absolutely,
Right,
there's
because-
more to discuss here, and allow it, and that's up to us.
Because, I mean, we all know there have been some issues that are quite complex,
There.
so.
I just want to give everybody a chance to speak, though, But I like the idea of you can suspend the rules and let somebody speak longer.
Yeah, because there are times where it just makes sense to suspend the rules to allow that. Okay, well, is there any other discussion? Or any other amendments that folks want to offer?
No, but I do think the clock will have to be there, because we got the clock and now we're not using it for the public speak. I mean, there would have to be some mechanism to see it.
Jeffrey, do you know why the clock isn't being used?
if-
Or do we need a new clock?
If I could, sorry.
Oh, so sorry.
I
Yes.
spoke to Jeffrey this afternoon, and I asked him if he could make up something that says, like for public speak, 30 seconds, a card. And then for this, maybe 1 minute, a card. So that, because nothing's worse than the public speaking, some of them are
Being
nervous.
interrupted.
And you interrupt them by saying, you got 1 minute left.
Yep.
And it throws it off.
Why can't we just have a clock up there that's set at 3 and it counts down to 0?
I thought we could do that on our screen.
I mean, that would be the way to go, like a timer on our phone.
Yeah.
Let's let Jeffrey go. Jeffrey, can you weigh in here?
I think the issue with the clocks that President Murphy-Ramboletti got was that in having it displayed out to the chambers, she herself could not see it in order to control it and be able to give like prompts of, how much time is left.
But if they can,
Yeah. I see what you're saying. It's almost like we need a two-sided clock. Which, does that exist, Jeffrey?
but we can see it.
That's true.
I'm sure it must exist. I just, from talking to her, I know that was the issue with it.
Yeah, I also think that, like, to Councilor Vacan's point, we can see it in chambers.
Right.
So we also could easily just designate somebody who during public speak just is the person that says 30 seconds, because we can see it.
And if the speaker can see it,
Right. and
when
the
it's
speaker-
0, you're.
So maybe that's something we'll bring up
Why do they
to,
need a verbal necessarily?
Council President, and just get her sense of it, because that could be an elegant, easy solution to kind of move it forward while we're trying to figure out another way. Yes, Councilor Ocasio?
I was thinking probably giving the president a timer.
Yeah.
So she can know, since she can't see the
You
time.
can just, just set it.
So the public is seeing the clock, and it'll buzz her, the timer will buzz her and let her
You
know
can do
that
it
3
right on
minutes
your
are
cell
up.
phone.
I know, yeah. Well, I have a thing for my students where it literally counts down for them so they
Yeah.
they can see.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll bring that in. Okay, well, I think that gives us a good sense of it at least. All right, any other amendments to this?
Well, I just have one more question,
Yeah,
because it seems to me a little bit like a logistical nightmare. Does this mean that every time somebody starts talking, somebody's got to sit there and set the clock?
Yeah.
Because, I mean,
That is what it means. Yeah.
that is
But again,
going to be tedious.
really all we need is like a 3-minute egg timer,
Right.
and you just flip
Right.
it, And it's sort of
Joe
like,
McGivern actually had one.
I mean, it was
But
Mr.
that
Joe
is the
McGivern
thing to
did.
do. You don't want to make
They
a
just
big
went like that.
thing out of it.
You are, that's a good point. Let's try to find a way to do this in a way that does not feel like an I got you. It's just like okay, you're at 3 minutes, right? But like a discreet thing, not like this big blaring thing that makes someone feel
Yeah,
away
because it
about
sort of feels like it's aimed at pretty much one person, this whole thing.
But also, we're creating rules in this body that are not just for the council that we have. It's like you never know who's going to be on council next term, right? So I think a lot of it is just us naming our value is that, folks need to be sharing airtime. And also, they get to make their point. No one should be censored. Everyone should get to make their point. But let's make it as efficiently as possible so that we can keep moving, meetings moving. I don't think that's a bad value for us to come out in support of. And in general, I think that we do a good job with this. And maybe it's just reaffirming our value in it.
Well, I will say, I do want to be on the record to say that I do think everybody in our council meetings has an opportunity to express their views. I don't think anybody's been shut down at all.
No.
Not at all. So I don't at all. I mean, I won't support this if that's the spirit of it. And if the spirit of it is to target an individual, I won't support it either, because that's not what I'm about with the rules.
That wasn't my intent.
No, and that's not how I feel about it either, especially because I think any rule we make, you can look at some of the rules and you can see that, why was that created? That must have been for a very specific situation,
Well,
right?
they're usually because of a problem of some sort, right?
But
or
I think
sometimes.
But I think the problem that we're really identifying here is that this is the first time we've been operating underneath a meeting cap. And
Well,
for
this is it's a rule we made. It's not a law.
Oh, totally. But for the most part, we've done a good job with it. After a few meetings that were very rocky, because we were figuring out what it really meant to have that cap and what would happen to our next meetings, which now have 30 agenda items added to them, right? But some of those were brutal as we were figuring it out. I think now that we've figured it out, honestly, it's a little bit less of an issue, but I still think it's okay to be proactive and say, like, people just be aware of your time. And I really don't think it's going to be a big issue. But I think if we, are able to get Jeffrey an egg timer, I think that would be the easiest way of doing it.
I do think we should have the president weigh in on this, because it's going to be on her to do this.
Yeah, well, I think it's also okay, like, Tessa Murphy couldn't be here tonight, but, like, I think we can move it to council, and she can certainly, share with us how she feels to be shared, or she can remove herself from debate and suspend the rules in order to be able to share her thoughts when it comes up to council. She did not speak to me worried about this ahead of time, which is not to say that she does not have concerns, but she certainly did not feel the need to speak to me ahead of time before we met, knowing that she couldn't be here.
Yeah, and what did we set the time at public speak to? Did we increase it to 2 minutes or 3?
3.
I thought, somebody asked, sorry to interrupt.
It was supposed to be.
Somebody asked me that today. They said, isn't it 3 minutes? I said, I think only on one occasion we suspended the rules, but I don't remember why, to let them speak longer. But I think it's still 2 minutes.
We increased it, I think.
Let me find it.
We increased it at one time.
We did. This council did.
It is 2 minutes.
2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Okay.
Oh, was
And
it
it used to be 1.5.
originally? It was 1.5.
And we
The
increased
item
it to
was
2.
3. We reduced it to 2. But it was still an increase.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeffrey, your hand is up. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, just on the timer discussion, I think what we could do is get a Bluetooth timer so that whoever's controlling it could see the time on their phone and have it displayed out to the chambers.
That works.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're going to have to experiment with some options that work and make sure it just is doable, is not a logistics nightmare, and is also a kind of a respectful choice as well. Okay. I'll make a motion to send this to council with our approval.
I'll second that.
Any further debate? All in favor?
Well, I just want to clarify that it's as amended.
Yes, absolutely.
with-
Sorry.
No counselor shall speak more than 3 minutes at a time during debate.
Yes. Okay, so the motion is to move this to council with our recommendation as amended.
And I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
Motion to take up item 7?
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 7, from Bartley-Order, the city council amend its rules to incorporate under our section 3 or some other section the following state law. The public body or its chair or designee shall, at reasonable intervals, review the minutes of executive sessions to determine if the provisions of this subsection warrant continued non-disclosure. Such determination shall be announced at the body's next meeting, and such announcement shall be included in the minutes of that meeting. And then it says, see Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 22, and then GL. Okay, and I don't have anything attached to this. So I guess,
We haven't requested a legal form or anything yet.
okay, so one of my questions is just I understand the purpose of this and the situation that's caused it. And I wonder what it looks like for us to regularly have almost like a bulleted list of here are the, past executive session meetings that have still not been given leave to be shared publicly. How often would we want to be reviewing that list to see, like, I want us to look at these 6, right, this next council meeting? And where in the rules would we put that procedure? And is it something that we're building in regularly, or is it, ad hoc at the will of a counselor who can call it after X number of days? Because it says it should be the public body or its chair or designee shall at reasonable intervals. So I guess the question is, what's the right interval? Yes, Councilor
So
Bacon?
I haven't reviewed the open meeting law as closely as I had a while back, but the reasonableness standard, I think, was 90 days after the issue has been resolved or the meeting was closed. So it's supposed to be reviewed regularly, and it is the responsibility of the council. So the law department has been advising us, which is fine for them to advise us, but it is the responsibility of the council. So I was almost, because I was thinking to myself, because I was looking through the ones that are redacted in portion and held back, thinking, how are we going to move these to have them determined to be released, which I believe has to happen in executive session. So I almost was thinking the best thing to do would be to have a standing thing, that we just, each meeting, or once a month, we review the status of those executive sessions that have not been released.
I wonder though about how frequently we are going to be willing as a body to have an executive session before the regular council meeting. And so every month might be a lot.
Well, what I meant when I said every month was to have it on the agenda, so that if there was something that somebody felt should be released, then it could be brought up and then a meeting could be called. But that they'd be there. Because right now, unless it's something that you're paying close attention to, I think it would be a hard challenge for members of the council to say which minutes, how many of them there are, and which are held in whole and which are partly redacted with sections waiting to be released. I think members of the council would be hard pressed to list them. So it'd be good if it was out there in front of us
Okay.
somewhere, like a tabled item that we take up if we
Yep.
feel there's something that should be released, because we don't want to end up back where we were with all those minutes.
So I'm hearing sort of 2 things. One, we want to be able to require a standing report provided to council from the legal department of a list of non-disclosed executive session minutes.
That's fair, yeah.
Where would that go?
It has to come to council because the body as a whole is responsible for releasing it or explaining why it's not.
But also the requirement itself. Does the requirement go in our rules? Does it have to go into ordinance? Solicitor
It's a-
Bissonnette, where would that go? That requirement that we want this? Or do we make this just precedent where our assistant just asks for it and we expect it? Or do we have to make it a rule? Do we put it in an ordinance?
So the order requests a rule.
Solicitor Bissonnette, what is your thoughts on this?
I think you need to distinguish between the council itself and the other bodies that Councilor Bartley is referring to. So you've got the Board of Public Works, the Board of Assessors, you've got the Retirement Board, several other quasi-independent bodies that all have to follow the open meeting law rules when it comes to executive sessions, how they're declared, how they're voted on, how they're conducted, and the minutes, whether or not they're released or released in redacted form. But Councilor Bacon is correct. The standard is that once a matter has been disposed of that created the reason, the necessity for one of the open meeting law exemptions to apply, once that rationale for the exemption is gone, then the protection no longer abides. The minutes do need to be approved first in executive session and then by the full council. But I think there may be some misunderstanding because the independent bodies, the ones that are not under direct control, the council have no, their violations of the open meeting law are just that. Their violations. Members would be subject to, I believe the penalty is currently $1,000. And that doesn't impact the council. So for example, if the Board of Public Works were to violate and were found to be in violation, the members there would be fined. We just went through this with the BPW to put them in notice because of the delay in their executive session minutes. So that's almost corrected now. I think in the next month, I would expect to see both BPW and whatever remains in the council's executive session jacket for minutes also to be resolved and put forward.
If we wanted to have a standing report provided to council from the legal department of a list of non-disclosed executive session minutes, along with a sort of almost a judgment around, this is the list of those who are ready to be disposed of.
Opinion.
Versus these are the ones that are not yet ready. Is that something that we need to just request? And then that just goes in as a communication. The problem is that I think that list itself is effectively embargoed, right? Like no one should see it as a communication to an agenda because it needs to be only seen in an executive session? Or could it be provided to council as a listed communication? Yeah,
The
sorry.
simple matter of going into executive session is public.
And for
The
what
subject
purpose?
matter of the exemption is public.
Okay.
But what transpires within the executive session itself and the contents of the meeting minutes are still privileged and private until such time as there's an action to release those from executive session to the full body.
Solicitor Bissonnette, do you believe that this could be made as just an informal request, or do we have to standardize this in some way in our rules or ordinance?
I was thinking that a notice that an executive session was held should be provided to the council. Of course, the council would know its own executive sessions, but if other bodies were to hold executive sessions, you may not see that reflected in their minutes until such time as it's called to your attention. They should be in the minutes. It should say, and it should also declare the vote by roll call, and then the rest of it would happen in executive session. But if you wanted to add a requirement that the bodies notify the city council as a part of your rules, that certainly is permissible. You can either put it in your rules or you can make it in the ordinance.
Okay. Councilor Bacon?
Thank you. Through the chair to Attorney Bissonnette. So when we're speaking of
Yes,
our
ma'am.
own body, the city council itself, it looks to me like Councilor Bartley is seeking for us to create a rule so that we make sure we are aware and listing it and making sure we go into executive session to do it on a regular basis. Would that be proper for us to incorporate some language like that into a rule and then also include the request for the other public bodies to inform us?
My thought on that was it would be probably a good practice to put executive session meeting minutes as a laid on the table item. You know, you could categorize it by the date and then just put still embargoed as a possible way to keep your eye on it and make sure that the public is aware that you haven't forgotten it.
Okay,
I think that's a good solution.
thank you.
Are we allowed in our rules to put in, like, all of our rules effectively govern us? So I'm not sure we're allowed to put in a rule that would govern, for example, like the Board of Public Works,
Yeah.
executive session
You're
minutes.
right,
our
that would be,
rules.
Maybe not.
that would be an ordinance. That would
So
be an
I-
ordinance, similar to the requirement that they forward their minutes, that they not meet before 5 PM. So I would put it in that section, which I don't recall the code at the moment, but I think that's a good place for it.
So maybe next time we take this up, we could look at that. And in the meantime, I think that the next step is to talk to the city council president about adding in that as a laid on the table item. I think that's a good next step. Oh yes, Councilor Devine.
Yeah, just, I'm a little confused and want to make sure I'm getting this correct. It's from Councilor Bartley in November, ordered the city council amend its rules, assuming, the rules that we have, to incorporate under our section 3 or some other section. Our section 3 in our rules is the president. So again, I might be confused. I'm not sure. And then when it says, or some other section, who picks that section? Am I wrong? Is that what I'm looking
I
at?
think he's just asking us to look at it. Yeah.
And because I'm not sure what he meant. And then follow the state law, that the public body, again, I think you've explained that, who the public body is, or its chair or designee. I don't know that those are defined, for me anyways. So that's just kind of my confusion.
Yeah, so, to the solicitor, next time we take this issue up, if we could look at adding a requirement that bodies communicate their executive sessions to council and figure out where in ordinance that should go, along with a list of what bodies that would impact. Yes,
And
Councilor
can we
Bacon.
also get ours in a list form for the council itself?
Yes, and I know that last time we were in executive session to review executive session minutes that had not been previously disclosed, we did have a list at that time. And I think
had
we
some
just need,
discrepancies and some back and forth, so.
right,
just
and
to
so we
get
need an
clean.
updated, so it would be great if we could have an updated list, Mr. Bissonette, so that we can then have something ready to attach when we get to that laid on the table. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Work on it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, motion to
Table.
table
For feedback from Attorney Bissonette and the list of executive sessions that the minutes have been held for.
and support in working on an ordinance change.
And support on working on an ordinance change.
All right, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Item 8.
Motion to take up item 8.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 8, this was November, McGrath Smith ordered that Rule 9J be edited to remove the first two sentences so that it reads, if legal form is not provided 48 hours prior to the meeting, upon objection of any member of City Council, the matter will be tabled until the next meeting. This came out of our conversation where we handled the rule prior to that and rolled language in from one rule to the one before it. We're not redacting that. There's no reason to have it be repeated. And so at the time we realized we had to put in a companion order in order to streamline the rules. And so we wanted to keep the intent of the original 9J, even as we shifted those first two lines elsewhere.
Right, I call it cleanup, and I'll make a motion that we adopt the change to Rule 9J.
Any other discussion?
I just have a
Yes.
quick question.
Yeah.
When it's, I agree to make it shorter, but upon objection of any member, what exactly does that mean? Somebody can object to the 48 hours?
No, Councilor Bacon?
If legal form was not provided to the council 48 hours ahead of the meeting,
Right.
any member can object to acting upon it.
To acting upon it?
Yes.
Okay,
And it would need to be tabled to the next meeting.
Okay.
For proper notice.
They
okay,
can say, I
thanks.
wasn't properly noticed. I didn't receive this. I couldn't, I didn't have time to look at it. We can't take this up
It's
today.
okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
I understand now.
All right.
So I made the motion to adopt the amended language for Rule 9J.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion, or item 9,
On motion to take up item 9.
November 2024, Devine ordered that city council reconsider our vote to appoint the city treasurer rather than have it be an elected position, and further take the necessary steps to combine the treasurer and tax collector positions into one office. I'll defer to the maker of the order.
Thank you. I'd like to give it leave to withdraw for the simple reason, I think when I filed this, maybe we didn't know we were having a special election tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so, depending on what happens
was a while
tomorrow,
ago.
God only knows what'll happen. So I'd like to give that leave to withdraw.
Okay, so with the at the request of the maker, I'll make a motion to give this leave to withdraw.
Second.
Thank
All in
you.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Item
The motion to take up item 10.
Okay. Item 10, second, all in favor?
Aye.
1124 from Attorney Jane Manileski, Assistant City Solicitor. This is a document titled City Council Voting Specifics. And it says, every member who is present when a question is put shall vote on the matter unless the city council for special reasons excuses the member or unless the member's private interests are involved therein. General requirement that vote is required unless conflicted out. City Council Rule 8G. And then what does that mean? For each of these specific provisions, how many of us need to vote in order to pass that motion? And then under what authority does that come from? And I don't know if I need to read all of these into the record. Do I need to read all of these into the record? It is
Well,
3 pages.
if you want to hear my motion
fast.
first, you can do what you want, but
What are you thinking about item 10?
I've reviewed this list, and I believe there are technical areas in it that need to be updated and corrected. I believe this was perhaps drafted before we passed our ordinance on our 2/3 vote, because there's language in here that does not include that.
Do you know which ones?
Anything that says 2/3 of city council present and voting,
Now should be out of the full body because of the shift.
well, it's not, that isn't the exact language, but hang on, and I will get it. So in this document, she's referring to the rules. Okay, so the language relative to this is if a 2/3 majority vote for passage is required, shall be deemed passed if 2/3 of those members present vote that the legal form be approved, or whatever action is happening be approved.
Is that different from what's here?
Yes.
How is it different? Sorry, I'm being.
So we had a big debate about this. This went on for almost a year, back and forth, and we had 3 or 4 different legal forms. And one of the legal forms said present and voting, and if you recall, the main argument was all the ordinances in history had been passed of 2/3 of the full body, whether they were present in the room or not. And then the one legal form language that was not requested by committee, or maybe 2 were requested and 1 was chosen, I can't remember exactly, said present and voting, and the other one said present, to count for the count, whether you were voting or not.
Because
So,
otherwise you would change it if somebody was saying, no, I'm in conflict, thus I can't vote, and it would be out of, say, 11.
correct. So if that was the case and it lowered the number of those present, it's the same effect as a yes vote. So that was a big debate that we had for months and back and forth and et cetera, et cetera. But nonetheless, the ordinance language says, passed if 2/3 of those members present vote that the legal form be ordained. So, or passed, or whatever you want to say. But that's the language in the ordinance that is not referenced here. And there's a further debate over the 2/3 vote relative to appropriations from one department to another, which, as I understand it, is with our law department and the mayor's office under some consideration I don't know the details of, relative to what applies in our ordinances and charter relative to the transfers, which is tabled in city council. So,
Yeah, I'll be honest, I feel like I am very tempted for us to table this until, I mean, I feel like there are other members of council who should be here to help us talk this out.
perhaps, and my request was gonna be to make a motion to send it back to legal to update it, because I really believe this was drafted before we passed the ordinance.
Okay. Well, we certainly could do that.
I mean,
and then we
but
could
I'll
ask
do-
for,
I
we could
mean,
at least ask them, we could table, send it back to legal and ask, is there anything in here that does need to be updated before we take it up next charter meeting? And I think we should reach out to a number of counselors, just to have like more voices from ordinance, more people who remember the details of that conversation in order to really hash out how we feel about this before we bring it to council.
Well-
Or when we move it to council, we're gonna have a full committee meeting there.
Well, we don't want to do that. But we did hash this out repeatedly and at great length for months.
And I came in, I remember my first meeting on ordinance, we were voting on it, and I was like, what is this?
Well,
Because I was coming in on the tail end of a conversation that had been happening for
on
so
and on
long.
and on.
And I do feel
Yes.
like even though that ended there and moved on, there's a lot of the specifics of that entire debate back and forth that I would love to review and have a better understanding of before I look at this and have this conversation.
Well, and that's fair, but the language in our ordinance is specific and clear, and it's not this.
Okay.
That's all I'll say. Thank you. So I'll do it whichever way you want.
Okay, well, if you wanted a table to send it back to legal just to see if there's anything that needs to be updated.
To update, to include the ordinance and charter review. That would be my motion.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I'll second that, and then we'll look at it again soon. Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
And a
11.
motion to take up item 11.
all right,
was a little
second,
confused
all in
about this
favor?
Aye.
Aye, Devine ordered that Rule 9P be amended to remove the reference to items being tabled if they're not taken up in 45 days. And I'll create space for the maker of the order. I know you might have to head out, but that's all right.
That it seems like so many things get tabled and stay tabled. What you guys do tonight is wonderful. You know you tabled it, and you're gonna have something in the future. Some of this stuff is tabled, and it's never brought up again. So that's why, one, I changed it to 45 business days, because before it was 45 days.
Right.
And I had filed an order that was never taken up in 45 days. So whatever your pleasure there, is just, I'm just trying to make it so that we get things done.
Well, I do think that the legislative session, there's something to that we did create a rule. Granted, it won't go into effect until, this end of this legislative term, but we're going to be sunsetting, things and not just tabling in the same way that we had been. And I do think that the goal is to make sure that, committee chairs are getting through the jackets, and some are better at it than others. But I also feel like the opposite, if it's not tabled, I thought, again, this was before my time, that one of the arguments for requiring them to be automatically tabled after a certain number of days is because otherwise technically some items can just be left in the jacket and the public never sees them or even knows they are an option for discussion, or counselors can't bring them out into daylight to have a conversation. But again, before my time. Councilor Bacon?
Thank you. That was the reason, as you had noted earlier, it seems like some of these rules were made due to some reason. So this particular rule was made because when I was chairing ordinance, I was accused
It was
of
you.
holding things in the jacket and not taking them up. Well, now the current ordinance chair has learned, and there's 100 items in the jacket, and he hasn't taken them up. So some of the reason why these things happen is because there's too many things, and there's not enough time to get to them. Some people want to put reasons on why, and I'm not putting a reason on why, except to note that there's more things in the jacket now than when I was chairing the committee. So, but that was made for that quite pointed reason. But,
Well, that's good context.
so,
And I'm on ordinance, and I know how many things are in the jacket.
right, so I think Councilor Devine's point to eliminate this rule is valid. And I think the fact that we established cleaning out the jacket unless a council requests specifically, and they're reelected and they request to keep
Yep.
it, is a good rule. I was in favor of that 4 years ago, I think is when it first came up. And if we have that rule, we don't need this rule.
It strikes me, though, I think there's something to what you just said. But I also think if the goal is to get people's orders to see the light of day, this doesn't do that. We would need a rule
Neither
that
does
said...
cleaning out the jacket at the
Right.
end of the
No,
session.
seriously. Well, and that's my point. That I think if that is the goal, then we need an order that says all chairs need to take up, an order within the year in which it was filed to either discuss it and table it or to dispose of it.
Okay, so just to
you know.
further clarify, so technically, this rule has done that because every item that the chair did not physically, consciously put on the agenda is now on the agenda, published.
But it was never
as tabled.
discussed, though.
Well, no, but if it's, I think the only gray area that exists is they're tabled and they're listed in the public, but they're not posted on an agenda.
No.
So I don't know if that meets the open meeting law if we pull it off the table in a meeting without it being on the agenda. I'm not sure about that.
And the other thing too is, if you have it tabled, and you know, what I try to do is, in the finance committee, is, and I agree with you, Linda, ordinance was tough. And when you have public meetings and the planning board isn't there with you like it used to be, that was easy, okay? So that's what gets held up. But we have to figure out a way that, and it's also on counselors to remind the chair, oh, by the way, I had this order, can you take it up? It shouldn't always be left to the chair, because sometimes people forget they filed that order, you know, something like that. But it just seems to me that, and again, I was gone for 12 years, but it just seems that things are just staying in the jacket too long.
Well,
And I don't know if this fixes that, because if we do this and remove this tabling rule, then what happens is that those items are never tabled and they just stay never addressed at all in the jacket. I think is what will happen.
Yeah.
And so I don't really have any, I think that it's good to have them tabled because then at least they're on an agenda where people can see them. But I still don't think that that's solving the issue, which
And
is that they need
certainly-
to be taken up, discussed, and either dealt with or disposed of.
And it's certainly up to the chair of a committee to take those up, okay? But the other thing I find that with this, it's also up to the chair to never take it up,
true.
to have that power.
It's the same
and never
difference.
take it out.
That's
And-
true.
Being in the jacket.
Right,
No,
I mean,
right,
That is
functionally,
true.
it has turned out to be that.
right.
Although it doesn't have to be that. I mean, the reality is that any of us, and I've thought of it for a few orders that I have in different places that have not made any movement. You technically could go, and I've been thinking about, let's just test this out and see how jurors like it, because I don't think they would. Go to a meeting and be like, great. Would someone be willing to make a motion in order to take this off the table and say it publicly? I would really like this to be discussed, and it hasn't been.
Right, and
It would be awkward,
Yeah,
but technically you could do it, and the committee then either has to vote in front of you to take it up, like take you up on asking for the motion, because you can't make the motion, or they have to say no. But it could force the issue a little bit. I think that's where this could go. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But it is a tactic one could take. Yeah.
so I think the intention behind it was to make that possible.
Yeah.
And I'm only asking this as a question because the agendas all say notice as to what is expected to be taken up, right? But then
that may or may not be taken up.
right. But then if an item is tabled and it's publicly noticed, it's been received, it's in the public eye, so it seems to me that would technically meet the open meeting law.
I think it would, and that's why I think this was
And
designed
so
to do so.
I think if somebody has an order that's important to them,
They could.
it's there, you can see it, and I would recommend, because I've thought myself, how logistically would that happen? And at one of the meetings, it was attempted, but then it didn't happen because somebody wasn't there. But that was like the plan. So
Feel
it
free,
almost
even
happened.
leave to withdraw is fine with me. And I think we leave it up to the chairs
All
to
right.
look at their agendas,
All
take
right.
stuff up.
I do think, though, that when we bring this back to council, we need to just keep reiterating, like, this was brought up in the spirit of, like, as chairs, we have to make sure that people's orders are getting to the light of day.
Yeah.
It's just what it means to be respectful.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't mind that discussion since it was had relative to me a few years ago.
Public safety.
Context matters, right?
A good example is public safety. There were over 100 items, and
I
Jenny
know.
took a lot of them up, which was great.
But it did get at least then looked at
Right.
and reviewed and
Discussed.
it was a long meeting, but I mean, everything can't be about being quick.
That was
Right.
a good, that is very true. And also, I really appreciated that Councilor Rivera, when, planned a meeting. We're going to go through the whole jacket. And maybe that's a tactic that we just have to take on more widely in other places too, because there are other, committees as well, particularly ordinance that
I think ordinance is the biggest. It
Yeah.
always has been, and that's why we created DGR, to take some of the stuff out
Yeah.
of ordinance.
When was DGR created?
What do I want to say, 6-8 years ago, maybe?
Really?
I'm bad with timelines. Councilor
it's
Bartley
that-
was the author of the
Right.
committee.
It's that recent. And
It's
that was
fairly
and that was to take some of
Because
the
ordinance was so
onus
jammed
off of
up.
ordinance.
Yeah.
Well, then so it's interesting. I know this is, related to an earlier order, but, the thing about special permits, I think part of it is, again, structurally trying to figure out where to move things. And right now, you're right, things are still log jamming in ordinance. And public safety. A lot of things are being sent to public safety. Some things that I think actually could be sent to DGR. So that's another conversation too, around like what kinds of things are being sent to DGR. And maybe I'll talk to the chair there, and maybe there's an order to be made around that. Because right now, there are definitely things that are going to public safety that could go to DGR. Okay.
Well, I'll make a motion, if I don't want to speak for the maker of the order, but
Do what
I'm
fine.
understanding that the maker of the order is good with this being given leave to
withdraw.
withdraw.
Yep.
But under that motion, we
Have a
can still
conversation.
make the points of our discussion
Yes.
Right.
at council.
And let the
Absolutely.
chairs do their thing.
So I'll make the motion to give this leave to withdraw at request of the maker.
Okay, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, and a motion to adjourn the
Is there
meeting.
anything we want to take off the table?
Oh, we could. There are other
I'm only
items
kidding.
laid on the table that we could take up. Yes, it was. This is a good meeting. All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good
Thank you
night.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Solicitor Bissonette. Appreciate you. And thank you so much to Jeff and Holic Media and the translators.